My goal for the Toyota Unlimited Racing Development build is to eventually create the fastest circuit racing MR2 Spyder in North America.
There, I said it.
This junky MR2, which I purchased with an Iron Man livery and a katana shifter from a man in West Virginia who had a suspended driver's license, will be the fastest MRS in North America around a racetrack. Now, I just want to be clear, we are not remotely there yet. Every single aspect of this car is unoptimized.
2,235 pounds.
We have to make the car much faster, and I have to drive way better to reach that goal. Also, I am going for some very low-hanging fruit. Nobody modifies these cars for the racetrack, and when they do, they're usually doing at most a 2ZZ swap, maybe a K24. We are swapping in a 3.5 liter V6, which will give us a massive horsepower advantage, which you need at the racetrack. Also note that I am not claiming I'm going to build the fastest MR2 Spyder in the world, because Peter Zealy and CER Racing and a number of Spyders around the world would probably make that a much more expensive endeavor. But here in the States, as far as I can tell, the bar is much lower. So, that's my goal. I think that making YouTube videos is great, but I don't want to squander the opportunities I have just making content. I want to achieve something in the real world. So let's get back to this very serious build. Previously on the Toyota Unlimited Racing Development build.
I was expecting to see a lot worse than this, so far, super excited. This looks beautiful. Unless you feel strongly about it, I'm not even gonna pull the crank. We're gonna cut these down so that we can run the high compression pistons and be able to actually advance the intake cam just a little bit more and retard the exhaust cam just a little bit more. We are installing the Frankenstein Motorworks camshafts. It's got big cams now, it's got high compression pistons. These are the headers that I make for the motor. If you want to hang a turbo off of it or anything, you need to get the air into the motor. This is the Frankenstein Motorworks intake manifold. This really helps get the tuned runner length here so we can get some resonance in the intake. This really helps get a lot more air in there, helps the air ring and actually get a supercharging effect with it.
Now we have the upgraded 3.5 liter V6 Toyota 2GR engine back home, and we get to do the easy part, making it fit in the MR2 Spyder chassis. We begin by doing some basic engine gaskets, stuff we didn't have on hand at Mark's shop in Indiana, and things we don't want to have to do when the engine is in the car. The water pump, water neck, and oil pickup gaskets all get changed out. Next, we remove and reinstall the custom cast headers from Frankenstein Motorworks, now with exhaust gaskets. The very first goal I have with this engine is to make at least 3 times the horsepower the MR2 Spyder came with from the factory, which we dynoed at 107 wheel horsepower back when the car had the stock 1ZZ engine.
You nailed it!
But that's the conservative goal. I expect to make much more power than just 3 times. And the driving factor behind those lofty expectations is this, the Frankenstein Motorworks Velocity Stack intake manifold. For use, you need to disassemble this manifold in order to install the injectors in the fuel rails.
We've had issues with injectors on this car in the past that we're not trying to repeat.
These are 980cc E85 compatible Bosch injectors that Mark sells with his manifold kit, and they should be good for up to 400 horsepower on E85, give or take. Some mild strength Loctite helps ensure that the manifold bolts won't wobble out over the course of use, and as we bolt the manifold down to the engine, Mark has provided some locking bolts that will give us peace of mind. On goes the carbon plenum that will be blinging up the 2GR, which we test for leaks.
All right, okay.
I think it is sealed now.
It eventually seals flat, and we're good to move on to the transmission.
So this is a slave cylinder, and this is the type of slave cylinder that me and Ben in particular love because it is so difficult to bleed. Now on Ben's last track day, he was having clutch problems, and it was because of the slave cylinder. It's actually not in one piece. You can see that this is all one piece. And, well, this is multiple pieces. There's like a lip here that has sheared off. And this is what it should be looking like here. So yeah, the tooth spring is what holds all this together, but the lip is actually completely gone. The spring was still doing its job at some point, But yeah, Ben was sitting there at the track trying to bleed the clutch, but there was no air. There was no slave cylinder at all. That was Ben's problem.
At least we now know why the clutch wouldn't come off the floor, so Mark swaps on a new clutch slave cylinder in the hopes that we won't see this problem again. Now it's time to get our EB60 transaxle, originally sourced from a Scion TC, to mate up with the 2GR V6.
The EB60 transmission is never intended to be mounted to a 2GR, obviously, so there's some stuff that kind of gets in the way on the block side. So we're just gonna clearance that.
You know, it is kind of impressive though that it does fit without any kind of adapter plate whatsoever, like a K-Series would have.
Maybe slightly extra.
The transmission test fit requires a few more passes with the angle grinder, but soon it bolts right on. And with the grinding done, we can install the clutch and flywheel.
These guys have arrived, which are the requisite bolts for the flywheel and the clutch.
This is a 12.4 pound lightweight steel flywheel from Mark at Frankenstein Motorworks, which should rev up nicely and keep weight down. The clutch is a ceramic sprung unit, also from Frankenstein Motorworks, which should be good for more torque than the EB60 transmission.
We are going to do probably the most significant mod that we're going to be doing to this entire car, which is this oil cap. It's a little bit high profile, especially compared to this low profile oil cap that we are going to replace this with. Now we're ready to roll.
Is this thing gonna fit?
A valid question when stuffing a 3.5 liter V6 into a car that came with a 1.8 liter inline 4. And I'll save you the suspense. The 2GR does not fit in a ZZW30 MR2 chassis without hammering and cutting. A lot of it. You have to remove a large portion of the parcel tray behind the passenger compartment in order to access the forward cylinder head, which is helpful if you ever wanted to, say, change the spark plugs without pulling the engine back out. A little door in the firewall helps you access the alternator. And the low-profile oil filler cap, well, it's essential. The 2GR is not an engine that fits elegantly into the MR2 Spyder, but when you absolutely have to make triple stock horsepower while sticking with a Toyota power plant, there's no better option. With the engine technically installed, we can now mock up an exhaust. So I head up the road to Driver Motorsports. We're really lucky to have Driver local to us. In addition to being a JDM car importer that buys and sells 25-plus-year-old cars from Japan, they also have a dedicated bodywork specialist, an in-ground all-wheel drive dyno that we've used for a number of our cars, and, most importantly to me at the moment, a full-time fabricator named Devin.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Devin with Driver Motorsports. I am the performance manager and fabricator. We do have a fully functioning fabrication shop, and that is why Ben is here today. We're gonna knock out an exhaust on his MR2 Spyder. I honestly can't wait. I think it's gonna be a super sick project.
I want to ensure that the engine bay is exactly how we're going to run the car before Devin starts building in there, so we remove the OEM rear subframe in favor of a tubular subframe from a company called Woodsport in the UK. The Woodsport subframe has multiple pickup points to choose from for your suspension arms, meaning that you can run the car lower while compensating your suspension geometry to account for it. This is crucial in making sure that your car doesn't handle like dog, and it's why to this point we've had to run the car at essentially stock ride height. But if you take anything away from this video, I hope it's that mixing mods with mods almost never goes without hiccup. And in this case, the Woodsport subframe is not meant to be used with a V6 engine and a Scion TC transmission, which meant a pretty significant amount of clearancing needed to be done before we could even install the subframe.
So I'm just gonna go to town on this stuff, and we're gonna get it nice and shaped up, and then we're gonna gusset it up with some more metal, and it should be good enough. Where we're gonna start off today is we're gonna go up here in a firewall, because this is a dual bank engine, we do need to make sure that both of the runners to the X pipe are equal length. So this is going to be the longest path. So we need to start here. That way we know that we're making the shortest path match up with this one. So we'll have to turn down here and go under the engine between the flywheel and the oil pan. And we'll have to mate up with the X pipe. And then once we know that distance, we'll measure it out, calculate it, and then we will figure out what route we're gonna send this one into the X pipe. All right, we're gonna have to get rid of that guy. And out of the X pipe, we'll have twin mufflers and then out the bumper. So we'll get that tacked up to the V-band. We'll get this end tacked up and then put it back up and mark where the 90 needs to go. Tack that up and then prep it for the flex joint. We need to sneak a flex joint in here, and we got plenty of room here and it starts getting tighter here. So we'll try to squeeze it in right here. That should work. You always want to make sure that it is as straight as possible, and when you make the rest of the exhaust, there's no tension on it, or else it will cause this thing to prematurely fail. Not too bad.
If you've ever heard Mustang or Corvette guys talking about the X pipe on their exhaust, this is what they're referring to, and I have it on good authority from Frankenstein Motorworks and Wilhelm Raceworks that this engine sounds very good with an X pipe and equal length headers. So the goal I've tasked Devin with is somehow making the front and rear pipes of this transversely mounted V6 equal length with as little space as possible.
The wideband, we're gonna put 3 to 10 inches away from the collector. It's already hard to get up in there to do the V-band clamp. And pro tip, a Sharpie is about the length of a typical wideband. So if a Sharpie can fit, a wideband sensor will fit as well. The lower we put it, it's gonna be the easier to change it. So we're probably gonna put it down here towards the weld. You typically wanna put it with a downward angle. That way condensation and fuel doesn't collect on it, give you false readings. Make sure that Mark gets proper readings when he tunes this thing. There's 2 ways that I know to measure volume to make sure that whatever you're making is equal to the other side or multiple pieces. With manifold designs, common practice, because of how small it is you can get a beaker. You fill up your runner full of water, dump it in the beaker, and that'll give you a volume that the water was filling. This is going to take more volume than a normal beaker, and I don't have an extra large beaker here today. So you can also use string. It's not anywhere near as accurate, but it is a good indicator that you got close to making them equal length. We're probably not going to get like down to the milliliter or however you want to measure the inside volume, but we're going to get super close. So this is how we're going to do it today. When you use string for something like this, you want to try your best to stay on the outside of the bend. So we know that's outside of the bend there. We'll bring it around. That's outside of the bend, all the way down to that V-band. And this is how long we need to make the other side, from thumb to thumb.
In order to make the exhaust headers equal length to the X pipe, Devin needs to somehow make the rear exhaust almost 31 inches long, which means lots and lots of pie cuts.
We have no other way around it. We are far too close to everything, and this is where pie cuts come in handy because you can turn stupid, ridiculous turns like that. And not only is it a sharper radius, but you can also gradually turn it the way you want to. I do want to put a disclaimer. Pie cuts look awesome, but they kind of suck. They do increase your chances of cracking. So it is very important It's all purged, it's back purged. So what I'm doing is I'm putting argon on the inside of the tubing, and it is shielding the inside of the weld, basically allowing me to weld the inside of the tube with the outside. So that is a much stronger weld. So in total, it probably took about an hour just to weld that. I've still got to weld the flex joints. I did not weld these just in case I do have to tweak this piece. Yeah, so this piece down here, we are at, it was 7 inches, not including those top 2 pie cuts. And then we've got about 2.5 inches to add there.
I don't have any more B-roll of Devin finishing the exhaust over the next few days, so I'll just take this opportunity to advertise the fact that we have a Discord with almost 1,000 people in it, link in the description, and we do live streams on YouTube and Twitch every Thursday, so come check it out.
It is finally completed. We finally were able to make the rear bank match the front bank in length. We are within a 1/2 inch. I think this is probably one of the most crazy exhausts that I've ever built so far. And we've been told that all these bends aren't really gonna hurt us with horsepower, so it's not that big of a deal. We just don't want this thing to sound like a turd. The X pipe wasn't quite centered with the chassis, and it made making this muffler transition a little tight. So there's some crazy pie cuts here as well to make sure that we ended up straight out of the chassis. The other issue with this chassis in particular is it was very short from the subframe to the bumper. So muffler choice and fitting the muffler was not the easiest, but it looks good. I don't think that there's really a different muffler that would have worked better. I think it would have had to be a different routing design. I think it would have had to be out here with the way that this rear section of this car is designed. It would have had to been a big suitcase or come out of this X and go this way into the mufflers this way and out. But it's a race car. Race cars are meant to have center exit, so we had to do it.
Devin knocked it out of the park with what was a pretty tricky job, and unfortunately we're going to have to wait till next episode to hear how it sounds. First, the car needs to be wired up with a new harness and ECU, and then we're going to start the 2GR V6 for the first time.